Something you might not know about Canada.
Hi, I'm Don Tapscott, and before the break, I promised to tell you about the digital office. In the 1970s, the coolest decade of all time, the office was full of strange things like typewriters, dictaphones, adding machines, and mimeographs. Telephones were connected to a wire, so people could only reach you when you were in the office. God, I miss that. Not now! In 1978, the Canadian company Bell Northern Research wondered what would happen if every desk had a computer on it connected to a vast internetwork. Their incredibly handsome staff created an office that used crazy things like email, word processing, texting, and document management. Then B&R pitted the computerized workers against the computerless old-school test group. This first ever controlled experiment proved that the digital workers were more efficient, innovative, and effective. And they had more fun, too. And within only 15 years, office workers across the globe were playing electronic solitaire and watching cat videos to their heart's content. And that's something you might not know about Canada. Hi. Good morning. Wow, that's awesome. After I did that experiment in the 1970s, I wrote a book in 1981 that argued that computers are going to become communications tools and everyone will use one. My mother did buy most of the copies of the book. It was kind of like a study in bad timing. But flash forward to today, this whole computer thing is going to be really big, I think. For those of you who are tweeting, and I hope you are, on Twitter I'm at dtapscott. And just to remind you, the hashtag was hashtag 2015IEF. In the next 45 minutes, although my clock says 40, but I have 45, I'm going to try and convince you of the following idea. That the global business environment is changing, our economy is changing, the nature and architecture of businesses are changing, innovation is changing, and technology is at the heart of much of this. And it requires all of us to dig deep and to figure out how to change ourselves and our organizations. Now, that was 1981. I was cleaning up my basement because my wife and I are moving, and I've discovered these old slides. I just thought I'd share them with you. The one on the right there, that's actually me in 1981 working at home from a terminal that was connected through dial-up over a wire to our big mainframe computers at Bell Northern Research. Well, today, things have changed. Now, I finally did write a book that somebody read, and that was 20 years ago. And the digital economy, when that book came out, the world was a very different place, still. There was dial-up. There was no Google. Google was 5 years away, so you couldn't really search the web. There was no mobile web because there was no mobility. Telephones were still pretty much connected with a wire. eBay and Amazon came out in the fall of 1994. And everyone thought the internet was about websites and eyeballs and stickiness and clicks and page views, and that's what it was going to do. It was going to be a platform for the presentation of content. I argued in the book, no, actually that's not what the internet's about. The internet is a global computer that we all share, and this is going to enable us to collaborate very differently. And it's going to create a time of vast promise and also of peril, of danger, if we don't handle this right and fully exploit the technology. So you were actually looking at the 20th anniversary edition of the book that just came out. Eric Schmidt wrote the foreword, which is great, and I wrote a dozen new mini chapters. And I'm very happy that the organizers of this event are giving away the book because this is the best way to buy this book in massive volume. Christmas is coming soon. Well, let me try. You look like people with friends. No, seriously. it caused me to do a reality check on the digital revolution. And for sure, a lot of the promise has been fulfilled, and I'm going to explain that in my talk. But there's also been some dark side issues that have come up. I mean, a big one is that we now have a period of structural unemployment all around the world. This is the first time in human history where you have wealth creation and growth, but it's not generating jobs. And technology is at the heart of a lot of that. We also have a growing social inequality, weirdly, in developed countries like the United States. You know, the digital revolution was supposed to deliver prosperity for all, but it turns out that very powerful forces have captured this and are using it for their own parochial advantage. So how do we go forward? How do we solve these problems? Well, innovation and entrepreneurship are at the heart of it all. You see, because 80% of new jobs in the United States come from companies that are 5 years old or less. So, sure, we hope for big companies and governments and so on to be able to hire people, but that's not the way we're going to fix the job problem. The job problem and the prosperity problem overall is going to come from entrepreneurship. And this is a great time to be an entrepreneur, because little companies, thanks to the internet, can now have the capabilities of big companies without the main liabilities, legacy culture, systems, bureaucracy, and so on. So this should be the halcyon days of entrepreneurship, but we do have some impediments. I'd like to try and tackle some of those in this talk. Why are we in this huge period of change? And everybody senses it. The business as usual and innovation as usual is not going to work. The theme of this conference is innovation constructed, reconstructed, and that's a good theme. Well, 4 big drivers for change. The first is technology. We have a whole new paradigm in technology that's emerging. And there are these 6 categories. Let me briefly whip through them here. The first one is the social web. And we now have, what, 1.5 billion people on Facebook, hundreds of millions on Twitter and other media, Instagram and so on. But this is not just a new platform for hooking up online or something. This is now, or taking selfies and posting them, this is now becoming a new means of production. Social media is becoming social production, and it's starting to change the way that we orchestrate capability, human capability in society to innovate and to create goods and services. Secondly, it's hard to overstate the impact of mobility. My wife and our family were in Kenya on a safari, actually, in Samburu land. And we met a 14-year-old goat herder. And she didn't have electrical power, and she didn't have water. She drank goat's milk. But she had a mobile device with a solar charger that enabled her to pull up a browser. So she could find out about goat prices in the market, in the town, you know, about 80 miles away, and so on. So she's becoming part of the global economy. Now she's 14 years old. She's pregnant with her 2nd child. She's married to a guy in his 60s who bought her, our guides told us, for 180 goats. But she's got access to the world of information. She knows what progressive women are thinking about women's rights, because she now has some literacy. Her husband mistrusts her, and this weird little device that she has, that's a little vignette about how powerful being connected all the time is. Now, right now, there are 2 billion people who have access to the internet. In 10 years, it will be most of humanity. It's a company called DataWin that has a 1st-generation iPad. It's now available for $40, and that doesn't require a 3G network. So part of mobility is geospatiality. I can go outside this convention center with Google Glass or my mobile device, and I look around, and it'll tell me all about the convention center. I say I'm looking for an ATM, and it'll say it's over there, and it points an arrow on the picture. So the old web when I wrote The Digital Economy, people thought it was about surfing websites. Well, it turns out the web is about surfing physical reality. We have an intersection of the digital and physical ages. And then thirdly, we have this thing called big data. And when I mean big, I mean really big. Throughout the beginning of history, or from the beginning of history to the year 2003, humanity recorded 5 exabytes of information. That's a lot. An exabyte is a quintillion bytes. From 0 to 2003. In the last 12 hours, you recorded 5 exabytes of information. So we're moving into the second half of the chessboard. You know that analogy? The inventor of chess was called into the emperor's palace, and the emperor said, and I paraphrase, "I like this game. You can have a wish, anything you want." And the inventor said, "Great, I would like a single grain of rice on the first square of the chessboard. And I'd like 2 grains of rice on the second square, 4 grains of rice on the third square." Just keep doubling. And the inventor, figuring it was a few bags of rice, granted the wish. Well, a couple of days later, the emperor granted the wish. A couple of days later, the emperor did the math and figured out he couldn't deliver on the promise, because if every inch of planet Earth was covered in rice fields, there wouldn't be enough rice to grant the wish. So from the digital economy, 20 years ago up until now, it was kind of like the first half of the chessboard. But now what's happening is that the rate of acceleration is becoming so fast that it's getting beyond our capacity as individuals, as institutions, as a society really to comprehend it. So big data is an historic opportunity, but on the other hand, the small group of companies have captured this data. I don't know if you remember signing some agreement that said, "I'm going to create all this data, but you get to own it, and you get to do whatever you want with it without my permission, including building the greatest fortunes in all of history." So we have some big social issues to figure out here as we move forward. Then we have the so-called Internet of Things. Billions, soon some people say trillions of inert objects in our physical world that become smart communicating devices. My hotel across the way here, the door has a chip in it, it's internetwork, it's a Marriott. So they have really good technology, and the door has an IP address, which means the door is an internet appliance. I had a camera stolen from a hotel room in Miami a decade ago, and the door knew about me. It knew who'd been in and out of the room and found an unauthorized access. I actually have a friend in Toronto. Everything in his house that has electrical power has an IP address, meaning that all these things connect to the internet. I have no idea what his refrigerator says to his toaster, but actually he was bragging that his fence talks to his sprinkler. And I'm like, "Well, Ken, why would you care?" And he says, "Well, Don, if a burglar comes over the fence, the sprinkler is my first line of defense." So this is pervasive ambient computing as the physical world becomes smart and it becomes interconnected. So you know the whole debate about Uber versus the taxi companies? Well, whoever wins that, that's going to be a Pyrrhic victory, because in 5 years you're going to have autonomous vehicles driving around the streets of Raleigh. The Google car has already gone 1.5 million miles, and it's never had an accident. It has no driver. It actually had one accident. It got rear-ended from behind at a stoplight. In the next decade, you'll be 3D printing houses here. Now, this is a big opportunity. It also, again, raises some tough social issues. What happens to the construction industry when a couple of guys show up in a truck and they lay down these 2 tracks and you print the house? But there are all kinds of new apps. This is not just about home automation. The Internet of Things is really extending out into many parts of the economy. Then we have the cloud. Think of the internet as a big computer. We all program it, and that's what the cloud is. And every time you go onto the internet, you're programming this big computer. If you upload a picture onto Instagram or whatever, humanity is building a machine that we all get to use. And you're part of this vast historic construction project. And then we have the rise of robotics. Now, this is an Amazon robot delivering stuff, but robots are now penetrating all kinds of aspects of the economy as well. So this, you put all that together, and this is a whole new paradigm in technology that's emerging. Now, the second big change is that this technology revolution is intersecting with a demographic revolution. We have the first generation to grow up digital, and these kids are different. Who here has children or grandchildren under the age of 34? Hands, please. Wow, what a prolific group. That's good work. I was in Italy recently, and I asked that question. There was thousands of people in the audience. Just a few hands went up. And I was tempted to say, you know what, let's just cancel this talk. Everybody go home, light a candle, get out some wine, put on some nice music, make some babies. Because you need young people. But you need them for reasons other than they're just young. Now, I started studying kids about 20 years ago, and I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought, my children are prodigies. But then I noticed that all their friends were like them, so that was a bad theory. So I started working with a few hundred kids, and I wrote this book in '97. I said, these kids are going to have no fear of technology because it won't be there. It'll be like the air to them. It's like I have no fear of a refrigerator, because I don't view it as being technology. Well, flash forward again to today. They're not just growing up, they've grown up. They're coming into the workforce, the marketplace, into society, and there's no more powerful force to change innovation, and for that matter, every institution in society, than the first generation of digital natives. I'm a digital immigrant, okay? I had to learn the language. So let me just give you a word on this. This is the echo of the baby boom. But people call it the boomlet. It's not a boomlet. The echo is actually louder than the boom. There are 80 million of this generation in the United States, born between 1978 and 1997. And this is a huge force for change, their demographic muscle alone. But what makes them an even more powerful force is that this is the first generation to grow up digital. Now, notice how this cartoon here didn't get a single chuckle in the entire audience. This is from Growing Up Digital, 1997. When I used to put this on the screen, people would fall off their chairs. They'd be laughing so hard. Oh, a baby using a computer, that's like crazy. Now everybody looks at it, it's like, what's that weird thing in the crib? I mean, why doesn't a baby have an iPad? Or, or why doesn't a baby have an iPotty? This is made by Tupperware, so when your baby's toilet trained, you have a nice little bowl you can keep using. Ew. It's humbling. Sometimes I interview these kids in front of big audiences. This is just one I pulled up for today. It was like, I don't know, 7,000 people. It was the highest rated session at the whole conference, out of the mouths of babes. On the left there is Rahaf Harfouche. I asked her, your generation, do you use email? And she said, oh no, Mr. Tapscott, email is yesterday's technology. This is almost 10 years ago now. I said, if you did use email, what would you use it for? She says, email is sort of like a formal technology, say for sending a thank you letter to one of your friend's parents. I mean, that would be a good use of email. Two down from her is Sherry Kong, 20-year-old student in New Zealand, hired by the government of New Zealand along with 80 other students. Their job? To teach the teachers how to use the internet in the classroom. I said, so Sherry, what are the teachers like as students? She says, oh, Mr. Tapscott, the teachers, they're awful. Students, they talk in class, they don't do their homework. And beside her is Michael Furtick. He was the granddaddy of them all. He was 28 at the time. I've known Michael since he was 13 years old, when he was the project manager on my website, growingupdigital.com. They made him the project manager as a 13-year-old because he was the oldest and most experienced. And when Michael was 15, his own site was getting 20 million page views per month, and he sold it for an undisclosed 7 or 8 figure US dollar sum. One of the news reports said it was probably only $1 million. And I wrote him an email. I said, Michael, you sold it for $1 million. You should have called me. And he wrote back and he said, Don, legally, I can't tell you how much I sold it for, but I can tell you I'm very happy. And he didn't want the money to buy a Ferrari, although he bought a cheap little car, but his mom had to drive around with him because he only had his learner's permit, right? He wanted the money to invest in his next new venture. It's called takingitglobal.org. It's hundreds of thousands of young people in a social network trying to change the world. So this is the innovation generation. In their culture is the new culture of work and entrepreneurship. Now, I say that with some confidence because we interviewed or surveyed 11,000 young people in 10 countries. It was the biggest research project ever done about this generation and maybe about any generation. And these are the 8 norms for this generation across all different cultures. I'm going to be around later in the day. I'm happy to talk about it. But basically, they want freedom. Freedom is like freedom of choice. You know, it's like oxygen. They want to customize everything. I never got to customize the Mickey Mouse Club. See, the boomers grew up watching TV. This generation is growing up interacting. They're a generation of scrutinizers. When I was a kid, I saw a picture. It was a picture. Generation with very strong values. It's just not true that they don't give a damn. Oh, we've created a little army of narcissists. It's not true. There's no data to support it. Youth volunteering in America has been growing year over year for 17 years in both high school and in university. They're not voting. That's a big problem. But it's not because they don't care. More and more of them agree with the bumper sticker, don't vote, it only encourages them. We have to fix that. There's an emerging crisis of legitimacy of American democracy. For that matter, democracy all around the world. Generation that loves to collaborate, they love to have fun. They want things to happen fast, and they're a generation of innovators. When I was a young person, innovation happened at a glacial pace. We used to, our family, you'd all get in the station wagon and go to a big exhibition to see this year's innovation. Woo, an avocado-colored refrigerator with an ice cube maker. Crazy. Well, the Consumer Electronics Show just happened. There were 22,000 new products introduced at one show. So this is a time of change. And if you listen to young people, this is the first time in human history when young people can help us figure out the way forward. Among other reasons, it's the first time ever that youth are an authority about something really important. I was an authority on model trains when I was 11. Today, the 11-year-old at the breakfast table is an authority on this digital revolution that's changing every institution in society. Now, you put those two together and you get a social revolution. And the important message here is 2 words, self-organization. This is a powerful force that can be harnessed for good or for bad. Let me just give you a couple of examples. This is not a political story. It's a social media story. And it was kind of humbling for me because about 6 years ago, somebody sent me an email, a friend of mine, saying, you know this senator from Illinois? He thinks your book, Wikinomics, is the key to winning the presidency and transforming America. Go to myBarackObama.com. So I went there, and right on the screen, there's my book. One down from the homepage, and I'm reading it. We believe in inclusiveness, the use of the internet every way possible. We believe in the book, Wikinomics by Don Tapscott. I'm asking you to believe not just in my ability to bring about real change in Washington, I'm asking you to believe in yours. And I looked at this thing, and well, my first reaction was, I guess I am the man. But not so fast, because it turns out I'm not the man. You see, because there was a Wikinomics community, but there was also a single moms for daycare community and a young firefighters for Obama community. He created a platform whereby 26,000 communities self-organized, and that's what brought him to power. Now, sadly, in the second election, he abandoned all this in favor of big data. Rather than engaging young people, He went from yes, we can to we know you. And he targeted all the swing voters. He got himself elected, but on the other hand, he left behind an opportunity to engage tens of millions of young people in democracy. And now the last election had the worst turnout of young people in a century. So self-organization is actually a revolutionary force, and I use that advisedly. You know, there was a big debate about social media and social change, and then it got settled by one word, Tunisia. And then there were a whole bunch of other words that got loaded in there. But during the Tunisian Revolution, snipers were killing unarmed students in the streets. So the students would take pictures, triangulate the location of the sniper, send that information to friendly military units who'd come in and take out the sniper. You know, you think social media is about hooking up online? For these kids, it was a tool for self-defense. During the Syrian early days of the protests, before it all fell apart, you had young people out in the streets protesting. You get injured, you get picked up by an ambulance, taken to a hospital, you go in with a broken leg, and you come out with a bullet in your head. So President Assad was using the healthcare system to murder people. So these two kids in their 20s created this alternative emergency healthcare system using Twitter, where you get injured, tweets go out, you get picked up, taken to a makeshift medical clinic where you get medical attention as opposed to being killed. So I know when you look at it today, you think, yeah, but what a mess. And it's true, these wiki revolutions enable you to bring down a dictator, but they don't enable you to create the organizations you need to take power. But I'm convinced that democracy is never easy. And the arc of history overall is a positive one. And you'll see this is moving forward, although it's awful at times right now. Now, I mentioned there's a dark side to self-organization. This is a screenshot from a terrorist website that has a help button. So you want to commit jihad and you're getting lost in the website, hit the help button and we'll help you navigate over to the weapons section or something that might be more useful for you. And I hesitate to put this awful image on the screen, but forces of evil are also able to use this new platform. It has an awesome neutrality. And it will be what we want it to be. Now, it's my belief that there are more good people in the world than there are bad people. But it means that we can't be passive and sit back. And you can't just think, yeah, well, all this technology is good once it all gets all worked out, like the survey said. You got to be an active user and an innovator. We need to bring our legitimate expectations and our sense of democratic values and our sense of integrity to the table by the hundreds of millions and overwhelm this thing with opportunity and with good. Now, just one more point on this. This is protests over the last 30 years. So we're now in 1994, that's when the digital economy was written. This is a definitive database that's been tracking every protest in the world. When I wrote Digital Economy, there were 6,000 protests in the world. Today, last year, there were 280,000. We told young people, you work hard, you stay out of trouble, you graduate, you be a good kid, you can have a prosperous life. Well, I'm not going to say my generation lied, but we weren't very accurate. You know, youth unemployment in the US is around 18%. With underemployment, it's close to 40%. We need to step up. Okay, so let's move on to something more positive. This is all leading to an economic revolution, which is very exciting. A change in the deep structure and architecture of the corporation. Again, in the digital economy, I discovered this guy, Ronald Coase, a Nobel Prize-winning economist. And 20 years ago, well, I talked about him 20 years ago, but 75 years ago, he wrote a paper where he asked a deceptively simple question. He said, why does the firm exist? If we have corporations, you know, why isn't Adam Smith right? Why isn't an open market the best way to innovate? Why do we all work for companies? And he said the answer is, and he won a Nobel Prize for saying this, the answer is collaboration costs. The cost of search in an open market. This is 75 years ago he was saying this. To find all the right information to do something and the right people to do something be totally prohibitive. So we bring that inside the boundaries of a corporation where we have org charts to find people and filing cabinets to find information and so on. The industrial age was an age of scale and standardization. It was an age of vertically integrated companies. Well, along comes the early days of information technology, and the boundaries of companies became more porous as these collaboration costs dropped. Then we saw the rise of the internet, and the vertically integrated companies began to unbundle into networks. Now, the company Cisco figured this out, and they focused on what they did best, and they built partnerships to do the rest. This is my little poem. Focus on what you do best, partner to do the rest. Not exactly Longfellow, okay, but gets the idea across. And Cisco competed better. You know, how does North Carolina create a competitive economy? A networked business model conferred competitive advantage to Cisco, and they got ahead of all the others, Alcatel and Lucent and Siemens and so on. And now, collaboration costs are dropping so much that peers can come together and create value. Most of you are peers in this room. You're not superiors and subordinates, which is the way that corporations traditionally have worked. So if you can create an encyclopedia with millions of peers working together, it's 20 times bigger than Britannica, it's in 240 languages, what else could you create? By the way, the quality is just as good according to the big study that's been done. Could you create a computer operating system that way? Who here has heard of the Linux operating system? Hands, please. Okay, Linux is created by thousands of peers. Could you create a motorcycle? Well, the Chinese motorcycle industry of dozens of companies, they come together and they meet in tea houses and on the internet. There's no Harley Davidson pulling all the strings. This is now 40% of the global motorcycle industry, and get ready for the $1,000 car from China too. So let me just give you one example to make the point here. The guy on the screen here his name is Rob McEwen, and the reason I know this story, I'd like to say, I have a think tank. We scour the world to find all the best case studies. I can't say that in this case, because Rob McEwen is my neighbor. Go figure. He moves across the street from me and holds a cocktail party to meet all the neighbors. So he says, whoa, you're Don Tapscott. I've read some of your books. I said, great, what do you do? And he says, well, I used to be a banker, and now I'm a gold miner. He's a funny guy. He introduces his wife to the group. He says, I'm a gold miner. This is Cheryl. She's a gold digger. Thankfully, she is not. She's an amazing entrepreneur, and she has a sense of humor. But anyway, he tells me this amazing story. He takes over this gold mine. His geologists can't tell him where the gold is. He gives them millions of dollars to go get more geological data. They can't tell him where to go into production. He gives them more money. This goes on over and over for years. Finally, he's so frustrated, he's ready to give up. But one day, he has an epiphany. He wonders, if my geologists don't know where the gold is, maybe somebody else does. So he does a radical thing. He takes his geological data, which in the mining industry is your biggest secret, and he publishes it and holds a contest on the internet called the Gold Corp Challenge. It's basically $500,000 in prize money for anyone who can tell me, do I have any gold, and if so, where is it? He gets 77 submissions. They come from all around the world. They use techniques that he's never heard of. And for his $500,000 in prize money, my neighbor, Rob McEwen, finds $3.4 billion worth of gold. The market value of his company goes overnight from $90 million to $10 billion. And I can tell you, because he's my neighbor, he's a happy camper. he peered. See, conventional wisdom is talent is inside our boundaries, right? Your most precious asset goes out the elevator every night. Well, for Rob McEwen, the talent was outside his boundaries. You know, the best submissions didn't even come from geologists. They came from computer scientists and engineers. The winner was a computer graphics company that built a three-dimensional model of the mine where you could helicopter around underground and look where the gold is. So this is not some trick that he did. This is the beginning of a change in the deep structure and architecture of the corporation. And innovation increasingly comes from everywhere. And the challenge is to tie into networks to make that happen for you. Now, let me just give you a couple of examples of new business models that are shaking the windows and rattling the walls of the US economy. This is one, we call it the digital conglomerates. Google's an example. This is a new species of business. Google can enter into all kinds of different businesses because it has this huge data asset. And they can be adjacent businesses or not so adjacent. The automobile industry is a long way from advertising. That's what Google is. It's an ad agency. It makes money selling ads. But Google may well dominate the auto industry because it has the best technology for the next generation of a car, which is autonomous vehicles. So for each of these digital conglomerates, you got to figure out, what do we do? Do we try and fight them? Do we try and work with them and partner with them? Do we try and avoid them? What's our strategy going to be? Now, another new business model, I call them the data frackers. You know, fracking in oil and gas is you drive steam into the ground. It does horizontal mining, basically. Well, you've got these new frackers that are emerging that can do unbelievable things with data. So here's one, it's called relationship capital. Think of LinkedIn times 1,000. So you're trying to get to any one of the most 2 million, or the 2 million most important people in the world, and it will show you all of the links that you have to that person. And I did this. And I said, and I gave an impossible person to get to. It turns out that I know 20 people that know that person. And for every link, it shows how strong they are, who's on whose boards, whose kids go to what schools, and so on. This is all based on public information. This is a company called Data Miner. And they view Twitter as being a platform whereby everybody on Twitter is a sensor. And every tweet is a data point. So they're sensing stuff like there's been an oil spill, and CNN, as a result, knows about it 18 hours before anybody else. Or a company's there's been a bomb that's gone off. So security forces can know about it before anybody else. And this is an example of fracking, basically, of driving amazing technology into this whole world of big data and coming up with amazing insights. I call these the peer pioneers. You know, IBM didn't fight Linux, they tapped into it. I'd estimate a quarter of IBM's net worth came from that fact that they didn't fight Linux, they embraced Linux. They gave away $400 million to the Linux community. This is a company, okay, major conflict of interest. Was co-founded by my daughter-in-law, and their best friend, Joanna Griffiths, who's on the left there. It's called Knixwear. This is high-tech multitasking underwear for women. Women, ladies, your underwear should do more. Underwear for the good. Don't ask. Anyway, so they did a peer fundraising campaign on Indiegogo, and as they got towards meeting their target, one of the most important retailers they were trying to get to in the world discovered this, came in, bought up all their inventory, and did an exclusive deal. And now Knixwear, founded by these three women, is a rocket. It's taking off and just doing terrifically. So little companies can, Knixwear has 7 employees. It's a global corporation. It sources stuff from Korea, the technology. It's got a global distribution channel. It's got a huge, massive marketing campaign. Procter Gamble, 60% of all their innovation comes from outside the company. So you're looking for a molecule that'll take red wine off a shirt? Well, do the math. There are 8,000 chemists inside the boundaries of P&G that can work on that, but there are 1.5 million outside the boundaries of P&G, and sure enough, there's a retired chemist in Durham or a grad student in Taipei comes up with a molecule, P&G pays them a few $100,000, and they have a new billion-dollar product. So the uniquely qualified minds to innovate may well be outside the boundaries of your corporation. This is a crazy one. I actually came up with this word in the digital economy. I said you can turn your consumers into producers, or let's call them prosumers. How can you do that? Well, Threadless is a clothing company where all their designs are created by their customers. And they never actually produce something until there's big customer demand for it. This is a company that's growing very, very rapidly. And it's got just a few employees because the customers do all of the work. You can even get your customers to create your advertising for you. Did anyone watch the Super Bowl and see the Doritos ad? That ad was created by customers in the Doritos Crush the Super Bowl contest. Doritos says to its customers, you create great ads and we'll run the best ones on the Super Bowl. I've actually got a couple here for you. This ad was created by a couple of young women who were nobodies, but now they're somebodies because their ad ran on the Super Bowl.
Paper or plastic?
Paper's fine.
I like these. Oh, nacho cheese. Old school. Fiery habanero? Yeah, those are hot. Oh, salsa verde. Oh, blazing buffalo ranch. Giddy up. Gonna need a cleanup on register 6.
Ew. Okay, now you can imagine some of the ads are a little too edgy to run on the Super Bowl. But one of the more edgier ones made it, and I'm going to show it to you now. It's one of my favorites. This actually ran on the Super Bowl. I mean, what ad agency is going to dress somebody up in what is clearly a mouse suit and have them beat up your customer? But apparently for the Doritos demographic, that makes you really hungry. So a technology revolution intersects with a demographic revolution, creates a social revolution that has great opportunity but danger, leading to a profound change in how we get capability to do things, new business models. This is a time of big change. And it's great you're having this conference. It's wonderful, 30 years, it's spectacular. Now more than ever is a time for innovation because we have a burning platform for change. Do you know the idea, burning platform? You're somewhere where the costs of staying where you are become greater than the cost of moving to something new, even though that new state may not be fully known. You're on an oil rig, things are on fire, you got to get off, even though the new state is not known. We have a burning platform for change today, and innovation is at the heart of it. I wanted to close by just saying a couple of things about higher education because a wonderful university is at the heart of organizing this event. And the industrial age, as I said, was about scale and standardization, right? Something at the top pushed out standard material to passive recipients. Mass production, mass marketing, mass media, mass distribution, mass education, mass democracy. I'm a politician, listen to this negative advertising, vote for me, and then I'm going to broadcast to you for 4 years, and then we get to do it again. But you're inert. Could we move to a new model of all of these institutions for the networked age? Well, what is our model of education today? It's based on this thing called the lecture, which is a very appropriate model of pedagogy for the 15th century. But imagine this, people standing up in front of a class who are all passive, doing a one-way transmission. I'm a teacher, I have knowledge, you're a student, you don't. Get ready, here it comes. To me, the lecture is the process whereby the notes of a lecture go to the notes of a student without going through the brains of either. Now, I do appreciate the irony that I'm standing up here giving you a lecture. But this is actually not a good way of learning. You know, we're going to learn when we have one-on-one conversations. I'm just trying to convince you of a single idea, and lectures are good for that. But nobody's going to remember the 4 big drivers or the 7 new business models or, you know, the 6 types of the new technology paradigm. So how do we move beyond that model of learning? Well, the problem with the model is it's industrial. It's one way. It's one size fits all. And the recipient is passive in the learning process. We need to move to a new model. Now, that doesn't mean that we should all be on MOOCs sitting in our basements studying and that there's no role for the university. The opposite is true. And this is such a simple idea. Wherever there's a right or wrong answer, the best way to learn it is not in a lecture, it's in a self-paced computer environment. You go through stuff, you study it. I did my master's degree in 1975, and I took a graduate course in statistics. It was in a computer lab. And I went through things at my own pace, things I didn't, I tested myself, things I got wrong, I went over and over again. I remember thinking, wow, if someone saw me going over this again and again, they'd think I was really dumb. But nobody saw me, and I went over it till I got it right. I ended up getting an A. I ended up getting a scholarship in statistics and research methodology. I was never good at that. And I thought, wow, lectures will be gone in 5 years. By 1980, there'll be no more lectures. Apparently, there are still lectures in universities today. This is the silliest form of pedagogy. So wherever there's a right or wrong answer, you learn it from your dorm room or your home or wherever you live. Then you come to the classroom, and teachers are freed up from being transmitters of information to do what only humans can do, which is to work with you, to have small group discussion, debate, to have passion, to help you do projects. Nixware, a highly successful startup business, came out of a project at a university where these girls had to work together to create a new idea. So, sure, there's a role for MOOCs, and MOOCs are going to evolve, and they're going to change, and they're going to become better than just presenting lectures online. But we need both the interactive self-paced stuff for mastery, and then we need humans to lead in the really important stuff, which is about setting context, helping young people think, discovering the interrelationship between things, developing motivation and passion, learning how to think critically, how to debate. These are the things that are going to be important for a knowledge economy. Because it's not what you know when you graduate that's so important now. It's your capacity to think and to learn lifelong. When I was a kid, I graduated, I was set for life. You just keep up in your chosen field. That's what we thought. Today, young people graduating are not set for life. They're set for, I don't know, 15 minutes. And they're going to reinvent their knowledge base multiple times throughout life. So the university is not a place to create skills. It's a place to develop capacity, intellectual and thinking and collaboration capacity. Now, technology is important unless you happen to be a place like Amherst College or Williams College. I mean, my son went to Amherst, 400 students in the first year. There was never a computer in the classroom because the class size is 8 to 1. And the prof is not lecturing, the prof is working in a customized way with the individuals. So it's not about the technology. It just turns out that we can't get class sizes of 8 people. So we need the technology to help us with mastery. We also need to start to rethink the relationship between universities and society. Isn't it weird that there are, 10,000 statistics professors all around the world, and every one of them is developing their own little notes and PowerPoints and classroom guides and tests and maybe even software to teach what an analysis of variance is. How weird is that? There's probably 2 or 3 best ways to teach it, and it will be encoded in software. Why don't statistics professors get together around the world and create that kind of learning platform that will free them up to talk to kids about, here's how you use statistics to help build a business and to help understand this complex world that we live in. So that's a big change too. Now people say, well, the university is going to go away. Some people say that. Clay Christensen says half the universities in the United States will be gone in 20 years. Other people say, no, the university has the right to grant a degree, and that will always be important. Well, I think that both are kind of wrong in the sense that the university should not go away. There's a role for the campus. Among other things, the university is a great place for a young person to go to for 4 years and get older. God, I know when my kids went off to university, I was real happy they were at a place and they had dorms, and the campus experience is a wonderful experience. But if universities don't reinvent themselves for relevance and for effectiveness in the digital age, then new credential systems will emerge because employers are going to start to figure out, actually, this person who went through this whole private thing or who did an online program on a MOOC, these people are better computer programmers than the people who come out of computer science at whatever university. So this is a time of great change. And let me just end with a story to make the point. I was in 2008, I was asked to go to Florida State University and have a very long lunch with all the deans and the management of the university. And they were trying to think through what a 21st century university looks like. So I gave my views. I think we need to change the model of pedagogy. We need to change a few other things. And at the end, we had a conversation, about 25 people in the room. And the dean turned to a guy named Joe and said, a young kid, 22 years old, and said, Joe, you're the only student here. Why don't you tell us what you think? And Joe said, well, I think what Mr. Tapscott said is right. Actually, it's resonating with me. Thinking about it, I think we do learn differently as a generation. And he said, let me give you an example. I don't read books. He says, I think I'm knowledgeable. He's sort of saying I know what's in books, but I don't read books. I go onto the internet to get my information, and if I need to read a book, I don't go from beginning to end. I don't follow someone's narrative. I'm in and out of the book and on the table of contents, and I'm out onto the web. I don't read books. So the dean of the film school was sitting beside me, and he said, well, thank you, Joe. That was very interesting. I don't know if we should be excited about that or if that means the end of civilization. And so after the session, I went to him and I said, Joe, I'd like to get to know you. Let's talk. And he said, I can't. I have to go to Fort Lauderdale. And they gave me a plane for the day, so I say, come on. I'll hitch a ride with me and we'll get together. So we get in this airplane and I say, tell me about yourself. And he says, what do you want to know? I said, what kind of student are you? And he says, I'm a good student. How good? He says, well, I've always had A's, 4.0 grade average. And I said, that's good. Do you do anything else here? He says, well, yeah, I'm the president of the Students' Council. I have an $18 million budget. I've got 12 committees that I chair. That takes some time. And I said, I'll bet it does. I said, do you do anything else? He says, well, the really big thing is when Katrina hit, my daughter was from New Orleans, so we went down there to see what we could do to help. And there was no healthcare facility in the devastated 9th Ward, so I set one up. I said, you set up a health care facility? He says, yeah, you have the internet. You can do anything you want to do. You need an air conditioner, you can get an air conditioner. I said, wow, how did that go? He says, well, it went great. It's still open. It sees 9,000 patients a year. It's called the 9th Ward Healthcare Clinic. I said, that's good. I said, where are you going next year? He says, well, I'm going to England. I'm going to study philosophy, do a master's degree, and I'm really excited because we're going to get the British healthcare system. We just never went to a doctor when we were kids because we were poor. So he knows about the British healthcare system. It turns out he knows about Ronald Coase and Maslow's hierarchy of needs. He's as knowledgeable as any person I've met, but he doesn't read books. So I said, where are you going to school? He says, I'm doing a master's in philosophy at Oxford. Oxford and Cambridge would be the two hardest places to get into in the world to study philosophy. I said, that's amazing. I said, tell me about your parents. He says, he sighs, he says, well, both of my parents died in the last year, and one was sick and another was in an accident. I said, oh God, I'm so sorry. I said, do you have siblings? He says, yeah, I'm the oldest of 4, and it's my job to keep the family together. I said, well, how do you do that? They don't live here. He says, well, we're online all day long. And he says, you know, the best thing is we created a guild in World of Warcraft, and we go and slay dragons together as a family. It's like awesome. And I said, so how are you funding this master's degree? Did you get a bursary or something? He says, oh, yeah, I got a scholarship. It's great. It covers everything. And I said, that's wonderful. Where'd that come from? He says, well, it's called a Rhodes Scholarship. The Rhodes Scholar from Florida in 2008 doesn't read books. You know that song, Bob Dylan? There's something going on here and you don't know what it is. Now, Joe's an extraordinary youngster, a great future. But he's more like the rest of his generation than not. It's time to wake up. I'm out of time, so I just have a little video here, if I might, to end, to make a point. Okay. This is just a couple of minutes. We have been studying a lot of organizations, but we've also been studying nature recently. And fish come in schools, birds come in flocks. These birds, starlings, come in something called a murmuration. And throughout the cold British nights over the moors of England, starlings are out over a 20-mile radius doing their starling thing. And at night they come together and they create one of the most spectacular things in all of nature. And it's called a murmuration because of the murmuring of the wings of the birds. And scientists that have studied this say they've never seen an accident. The murmuration has a function. It protects the birds from predators. You can see, well, on the right of the screen here, there's a hawk, a fierce predator being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. And there's leadership, but there's no one leader. Is this some kind of fanciful analogy, or might you learn something about innovation and about this new networked age? Well, this thing functions according to the implicit principles that I've just described to you. It's a big collaboration. There's an openness, a sharing of all kinds of information. It has a great interdependence. Just like business can't succeed in a world that's failing, these birds function as if the individual bird can only succeed if the murmuration as a whole does. Like a community, for example, trying to build a new model of innovation. And it has a great integrity that gives the birds courage to take on a fierce predator. So imagine if we connected ourselves in this state or in the world with some kind of vast network of glass and air. Could we go beyond just sharing information? Could we start to share our intelligence? Could we create some kind of collective consciousness that might go beyond an individual or a team? or a company or a community. Well, if we could do that, we could do some extraordinary things. You know, during the Egyptian revolution, people said, Mubarak is too strong, those kids are going to go home, they won't keep coming out by the hundreds of thousands every day, he's going to crush them. And I wrote at the time, I don't think they will go home, because if they do, they know that he will hunt them down and he will kill them. Just like if this murmuration breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So I look at this thing and I get a lot of hope that maybe this smaller network world our kids inherit might be a better one. And this new age of innovation might be an age where promise is fulfilled and where the peril is unrequited. Thank you very much.